a remarkable guest. His talent has many aspects. He is currently making his own movie. He has produced many television shows. He is the owner of the Eureka Tribune online newspaper and more. Please welcome our guest, Michael the K.
Well, hi, Rebecca, and everybody out there in Radio Land.
We're really glad to have you, Michael. We want you to start
Well, I
out
know.
by telling people how you got your name.
Well, it goes back a lot of years. I have to give away my age almost, but I was always involved in some sort of show business since I've been a little kid. And I think it was 1966, I wound up working on a show that was produced by Murray the K. Now, those of you who were in rock and roll early would remember that Murray the K and the godfather of rock and roll, Alan Freed, started doing shows in New York. They were radio DJs, and they started producing rock and roll shows at the Brooklyn Paramount and other theaters. And they're the real reason that rock and roll got its start. And like I said, I think it was 1966, I wound up doing the last Murray the K show, and his real name was Murray Kaufman. And let's see, his wife, I think, was Jackie, and they had, Alan Freed went to his grave poor, and they just ripped up everybody in rock and roll. They didn't want it, so Murray decided to do a last show, and I did 22 shows, and I think it was the RKO 58th Street. And to give you an idea of the bill of fare, the headlining performer were the Rascals, the Young Rascals. It was Mitch Ryder without the Detroit Reels. He had a traveling band. Wilson Pickett, and in the bottom of the bill was Cream and the who were just making their first entrance into America. I knew who they were, but most people didn't. And I did 22 shows, and it was so exciting. In fact, I probably was one of the first who duct taped Roger Daltrey's microphone, because he used to throw it around. And they used to break up all their instruments every show, and then had to piece them back together, because that was their shtick at the time.
Wow, that's pretty crazy.
It certainly was. And I've been in it ever since.
Well, I understand you started when you were just a kid. How did you get started when you were a little kid?
It just came to me a few years ago how I got started and what inspired me, because to be in show business, you have to dedicate your life, and you have to feel like it's part of your life. And if it isn't, you just don't go anywhere. You just can't put that amount of time in it. But when I was young, when my brother was born, my mother contracted asthma, bronchial asthma, and every year she was in a hospital. So I was farmed out, usually to my grandmother, who I loved to be with. But at 5 years old, I wasn't allowed to leave her porch. So I started watching a lot of Little Rascals, and I said, they used to put shows on in barns and all this theatrics, and I said, I could do this. So I had the whole neighborhood grouped together every week, and we would put on shows and sell candy and sell lemonade, and we had the whole neighborhood there. And this went on for a few years until I outgrew it or something, and had forgotten all about it until recently. But they were the biggest inspiration. And if you go back on those series of the Little Rascals, and they went under a bunch of names, Clubhouse Gang, all of that, but they were some of the most talented people, and they're only kids.
I understand you put 5 years in the cabaret some years ago also.
5 or 6 years in San Francisco. See, I'm from New York, and I moved out to San Francisco in the 70s, and I became a DJ, strangely enough. It was the first thing I started doing, because I figured I could do that. I could play records better than most of the DJs. And I was down on Union Street, which is one of the fanciest, sort of poshiest places in San Francisco, and I worked at this bar called Gas Bars, and I would bring in all the sound. They had nothing. It was a bar that when we walked by, there was 5 people in it. Across the street from that, there was one of those meat bars. What was that one called? I forget the name offhand, but it was packed. And down the block was another one called Camelot, and all these bars would attract people that wanted to meet the opposite sex. So they were packed, and there was nothing in them. So I said, "Geez, I'll open up a dance bar out of this place." So I brought all my equipment and my lights. Every Friday I would bring in, and I would do a Saturday, and I think I did a Sunday night too. And we packed the place because I had all that audience walking up and down the streets looking for some place to go. And then what happened is, and you find this all the time, that people say, "Well, I could do that." So I sort of was shunted out of there. I asked them for a slight raise. It was something like $25 a weekend, which was nothing, and they wouldn't give it to me. So they brought in their local DJ, and in about a month, the bar was back to 5 people.
Oh, that's terrible. That's
But that's
terrible.
how people are. The bar business is not the entertainment business. It's the bar business. And if you don't know about entertainment, don't try to involve it in your act. It just doesn't work.
Well, I see that you also put in 10 years in the theater on top of that.
Yeah. The only thing, I played almost every theater in San Francisco with the exception of the ACT, although I had consulted with a few people that had events there, but that's a union house, and I've always stayed away from the union for some reason. So I did the Alcazar Theater for years. I worked with Danny Duncan, who was the most celebrated playwright. When he was 18, he wrote a play that went to Broadway, and I wound up with a partner in a TV series called Young Ideas that was completely run by children. And at that time, we had from 6-year-olds on, and I got involved with Danny through those, and I did a few plays for him. We did one called Generations, and one night it shows you the impact you can have. I'm sitting doing the sound, and in front of me is sitting Ruby Dee and her husband, and they bought the play. They were so impressed with it. I don't think they ever did anything with it. The piece was called Generations, and it was a wonderful family piece. And then I did a few other theaters there. So I've worked in several theaters down there. And theater is the finest form of artwork. It's a shame that Broadway has fallen into what it is today. It wasn't like that when I was in New York.
You've had a tremendous impact on all theater people wherever you have gone. You have mentored many, many people in the process of doing it. You want to tell us about some of the people you've mentored?
Well, it seems that that's my lot in life. I've started a lot of people in show business by the strangest thing. I'll give you one of a great example. At the time, I was running a club called the Underground in San Francisco, which closed in, I think it was 93. I left it in 88, but it's still talked about because it was so unique. Even Canada wrote about it. And it was a lot of people. It was a gothic type of club where people dressed up in costumes and all kinds of crazy stuff. And if they didn't get in. So we set a scene. And I forgot where I was going with this. Oh, on mentoring. Oh, so there was a guy who hung around there named Fawn Davis. And he came up to me one night and he gave me a series of postcards. And they were drawings of really model-type women, but very avant-garde type looking. Nothing, vulgar or anything. They were wild hairdos. And he said to me, "Do you think I have talent?" And I said, "Talent? This is incredible." So I turned them on. I said, "Here, take these over, I think, to a store that would franchise it." I said, "You take it there, you'll put them in there and see if they sell. And if they sell, they'll give you commission on them." Well, he took them over there and he sold everything he could produce. Well, anyway, I changed. I went to a few other clubs and left that. And then one day I get a call from him, and he said he invites me over for Thanksgiving dinner. He had just finished a Tim Burton film. He was the animation puppet man for several of Tim Burton's films, and that was the first one. And what was it, Nightmare Before Christmas? And it was all done in his studio. After that, he did James and the Giant Peach and a few others. And if you look on the last three Star Wars, he is the big puppet maker. So every time I go to see a Star Wars film, and I have them here and see his name on the screen, it's such an exciting thing. And there's been so many more. I've had proteges that have gone off. One of them now is running sound at the Opera at San Francisco. I mean, I constantly run into people that somehow the slightest thing I told them about showbiz made all the difference in the world to their career.
You've had a fantastic effect on people everywhere you have gone, and you have quite a following of admiration everywhere you have gone.
Everywhere, with the exception of this area I'm in now, which is quite different than anywhere else. When I came up here about 10 years ago, and I thought, well, I could work anywhere. And there was nothing here. I thought I would be a big fish in a little pond. It turned out there was no pond. But over the last 5 years, I decided, well, if there's nothing there, let's create it. So I'm in the process, and still doing it, of knitting circuits together. I have contacts in L.A., I have contacts in San Francisco, and I'm trying to get them excited about doing something up here. Although this is a small community with limited funds, it's really lacking in presenting talent the way it should be.
Our guest today is Michael the K. Michael is making a movie. Michael makes many shows for television, and Michael runs a newspaper that he owns online, the Eureka Tribune. Michael, please tell us where you're stationed now. Where do you call home, this small town?
Well, my home right now is Eureka, California, in Humboldt County. Most people have knowledge of this area for the illicit marijuana trade, which I'd say about 60 to 80% lives off that here. It's a beautiful area. We're nestled in the redwoods, cut off by a mountain chain between here and San Francisco. We're 276 miles from San Francisco, and to me, this is just like San Francisco area, very much the same, with a bay and everything, like that was maybe 100 years ago. This whole area, depending on who you